So we are going to be watching round 6 of the Stockholm Regional Championships between Marco Silva and Giovanni Tonelli. And now they are both 5-0 at this point, so they're both doing really well, haven't lost to anyone, but still need 2 more wins to be able to make it into day 2. And Marco is running a team of Calyrex Ice, Amoonguss, Incineroar, Dark Urshifu, Gholdengo and Raging Bolt. And this is a very interesting team because usually on Calyrex Ice teams you see Water Urshifu and usually Pelipper. But Marco instead has decided to go for Dark Urshifu, deciding that that is enough for being able to hit Incineroar, which obviously Calyrex Ice struggles to do with Glacial Lance, but it still can do with high horsepower. But it also allows him to run both Gholdengo and Raging Bolt, as usually this team would have a Pelipper and a Water Urshifu and then have to choose between Gholdengo and Raging Bolt. But Marco gets to run both. Also, dark coverage is just really strong in general, with only 2 things resisting it, being other dark types and fairy types, and you can just close combat other dark types most of the time. So realistically, the only things that resist Urshifu are fairy types, which you have the Gholdengo to be able to help a lot with. With Dark Urshifu, you also get a much more powerful priority move in Sucker Punch, which means Urshifu can work decently well in Trick Room, but this team really doesn't need Trick Room that much. But Raging Bolt is also very interesting because it's 3 electric moves, but Thunderbolt not being any of them. Volt Switch is pretty good for letting Marco just pivot. He can use that to be able to get his Incineroar back in. He can use that to switch out his Amoonguss and bring it back in to get Regenerator. He can use it to set up Trick Room and then bring in something like the Amoonguss or something that is going to benefit off a Trick Room much better. I think Volt Switch is a very good option on this team, and then Electroweb is also very interesting. I think if I was Marco's opponent, seeing Electroweb, I would really be wondering how fast is that Calyrex Ice, because with that, it probably isn't going to be min speed, but does it have some in speed investment, let's say? That it's going to be outspeeding some things I don't expect it to with Electroweb. And the Incineroar also has Taunt, which is very interesting. It's probably mainly there for Amoonguss, but Taunt can just be really good in general. And Giovanni has a team of Kyogre, Amoonguss, Incineroar, Fluttermane, Tornadus and Archaludon. So he does have the Taunt on Tornadus, which might be useful here to stop a Trick Room from happening. He also has Will-O-Wisp on his Incineroar, and as Marco isn't running Terrafire Cali Ice, that's probably going to be really useful to try and get a burn on Marco's Calyrex Ice. Giovanni has also decided to run both Thunderwave and Icy Wind on his Fluttermane, which means his Fluttermane is probably not going to be very good in this matchup. However, he might be forced to bring it just because Marco has the Dark Urshifu, but it really doesn't do that much outside of just moonblasting things. If it had Shadow Ball, for example, it might be a lot better in this matchup. I think one of the key elements of this matchup is going to be how well Giovanni positions his Kyogre. Now, Kyogre could obviously do a lot of damage to Calyrex Ice teams. It also resists Ice, which is very good, but it does have to worry about the opposing Amoonguss and Raging Bolt, but Giovanni does have Terra Grass for that. But if he Terra Grasses, then he's weak to Ice, which makes it not very good into Calyrex Ice anymore. So if I'm Giovanni, I'm probably going to want to bring something like Kyogre, Archaludon, Amoonguss and Incineroar. Probably not in that order. I would probably lead like Kyogre, Incineroar with Archaludon, Amoonguss in the back. Amoonguss is really good for just redirecting, but it also covers if they set up Trick Room. And Incineroar lead lets you get a Wisp off and like parting shots and stuff like that. You just want to be trying to get as many water spouts with Kyogre as possible, so that's quite good. And then I think Archaludon is okay in this matchup, but I don't think Giovanni has many better options in this matchup than Archaludon. You could make a case for Fluttermane, as if you bring the ones I suggested, you are looking a bit weak to that Dark Urshifu. But again, I don't think the Fluttermane is very good in the rest of the matchup. It can hit the Raging Bolt super effective, but I would imagine this Fluttermane is more on the bulky side, and it's an Assault Vest Raging Bolt, so it isn't going to be taking that much. And then if you're Marco, you almost definitely have to bring the Raging Bolt. I think you want to bring Urshifu as well because your opponent really doesn't have great options for it, and you want to be bringing Cali Ice. And then the last one, I think Amoonguss is pretty good, but I think Incineroar just gives you a lot of positioning potential that it might be worth bringing. Gholdengo is also not bad here. It can ignore the opposing Amoonguss. It's fairly strong into Archaludon, but it is not very good into Kyogre, so that's why I wouldn't bring it. So if I'm Marco, I'm probably going something like Urshifu Raging Bolt with Calyrex Amoonguss in the back. So we see Giovanni lead the Incineroar Kyogre against Marco's Raging Bolt and Calyrex Ice. So the Raging Bolt is in a pretty good situation here. It can't be damaged that much. The Kyogre would have to go for an Ice Beam into it to be able to damage it a good amount, and a Water Spout will still do okay damage, but it's still really not threatened that much. But Giovanni is in a fairly safe position to just fake out the Raging Bolt and then go for a Water Spout, and that is a pretty free Water Spout. And now Marco also has a big decision to make here on if he wants to terrestrialize the Calyrex Ice, take a Water Spout, or make a more defensive play. I think if he's got the amoonguss in the back, this might be a fairly safe switch into amoonguss, but if he doesn't have it, then he is probably going to want to Terra his Calyrex this game, as he will want to have another water resist outside of this Raging Bolt. So I think it will be really telling to Giovanni about what Marco has in the back if he terrestrializes or not. And we do see a terrestrialization coming out from Marco on his Calyrex Ice. It is the Terra Water, so it now does resist any move that this Kyogre can go for. And we do see the fake out go into the Raging Bolt. Kyogre just goes for a Water Spout, doing pretty good damage. The Raging Bolt is going to flinch, so it can't do anything, but the Calyrex Ice gets to attack and it goes for a high horsepower onto the Kyogre, doing about 45%. So now the Kyogre has to be a bit worried about a Thunderclap. I'm not sure if it's in range of Thunderclap, I don't think it is, but it will still take a lot of damage from that. If it Water Spouts now as well, it's not going to be doing as much damage. So if I'm Giovanni, I'm probably either going to switch out this Kyogre or maybe go for an Ice Beam onto the Raging Bolt, and with the Incineroar I'd go for a Will-O-Wisp. And then if I'm Marco, maybe I want to protect my Calyrex Ice to protect from the Wisp, and maybe go for an Electro Web. I think a Volt Switch could also be good to help reposition, but if there's a passing shot into that slot, it might not be as good. We do see an Ice Beam come out from the Kyogre onto the Raging Bolt, putting it fairly low, and an Electro Web coming out, and now we'll see, does this Calyrex Ice now outspeed the Incineroar? I imagine it does. We do see it does, goes for the high horsepower, and the Incineroar just lives. Now, is the Incineroar going for the Wisp? It does, and it hits, burning this Calyrex Ice, meaning it is not going to be able to do much more damage this game. However, with how low both of Giovanni's two Pokemon are right now, it might not have to do that much damage, it just depends on what Giovanni has in the back. So now, Marco is in a fairly safe position where he could Electro Web and just Glacial Lance or something. Another option he could do is go for either Volt Switch or Thunderclap onto the Kyogre and Glacial Lance, because that means if the Incineroar doesn't switch out, the Calyrex will get the KO on the Incineroar with the Glacial Lance, giving it the +1 to attack. And now if you're Giovanni, you really have to be careful with this Kyogre. You probably want to protect it or switch it. It is minus speed, and it's in Thunderclap range. We do see it goes for the protect, protecting itself from anything that this Raging Bolt will do. The Raging Bolt did go for the Volt Switch, and the Calyrex just goes for the Glacial Lance. Kyogre obviously protects itself, but it will pick up the KO on the Incineroar. So Marco was trying to use that turn to not only pick up the KO on the Kyogre, but also let him reposition into whatever he's got in the back. And now Giovanni has to decide what he wants to switch in. If he has the Archaludon, I think he should switch into that because it threatens the Raging Bolt with a Dragon move, but it can also threaten an Electro Shot onto the Calyrex Ice, which even if the Calyrex Ice protects or switches out of, he is still getting a +1. So we do see the Archaludon come in. I do think that the Kyogre probably has to make a defensive play. If Giovanni has something like the amoonguss in the back, that's a fairly good switch in. You could switch that in and then go for Electro Shot and really start to let your Archaludon do a lot more damage. Now, if you're Marco, I think you might want to cover for the Kyogre not switching. You seem to be ahead in this game and you don't want to start making unnecessary reads and then lose the game. So you probably want to go for like either an Electro Web or a Thunderclap or a Volt Switch, something like that. And then the Calyrex, maybe you Glacial Lance to cover for the potential of a amoonguss switch in, but maybe you high horsepower to not. We do see the Kyogre switch out, and it is the amoonguss, so he does have the amoonguss this game. And we see the Electro Shot come out, gonna put him to +1, and then he gets the attack. Is it going to be enough to get rid of this Calyrex Ice? Calyrex Ice is a very powerful Pokemon, but it is Water type right now, so it is weak to this attack. So I imagine it will kill, and it does pick up the knockout, which is a huge knockout for him. But the Raging Bolt still gets to attack. A Draco Meteor would do a good amount of damage, but it just goes for the Volt Switch, which would have picked up the KO on the Kyogre if it was still in. But it just lets Marco reposition, which is really good. And we do see that he has the Urshifu and the gholdengo in the back. And I think the Gholdengo here is going to be really powerful. It can just ignore amoonguss and then set up nasty plots, but it does have to be very careful of this archaludon. It can just start electro-shotting it. So maybe the combination of Gholdengo and urshifu is what he wants to use in this game. But the issue with bringing urshifu in here now is that if the amoonguss rage powders, you have to attack into it and then your sash is going to be broken. So I think because of that, you might want to bring in the raging bolt. And we do see Marco does decide to go into the Gholdengo and then go into the raging bolt. And now he's in a position where I'm not sure if he wants to nasty plot, because this archaludon is going to be doing a lot of damage, but getting the boost is going to be really good. His Gholdengo is going to be able to take at least one electro shot from this archaludon. So maybe this turn he wants to go for something like an electro web and a nasty plot to guarantee that his Gholdengo is faster than the archaludon, get a bit of damage on it and get to the +2. But if I'm Giovanni, I think that you go for the electro shot and then the spore onto the raging bolt. We do see the nasty plot come out from the Gholdengo and then an electro shot coming out from the archaludon, which is going to put it at +2 as special attack. And it goes for it into the Gholdengo. How much is this going to do? I imagine around 70%. It lives on 1 HP! Wow, that does so much more than I expected, and probably a lot more than Marco expected doing that play. That was so close. That was probably a roll to pick up the KO. That is probably a not very bulky Gholdengo at all. And we see the Electro Web come out, lowering the speed of both Pokemon, but also boosting the defense of the archaludon, and then the amoonguss just goes for the spore on the Raging Bolt. So now, the Gholdengo is in a fairly good position, as it is at +2 and outspeeds both Pokemon, but basically any attack will pick up the KO. But rain has just ended, so his opponent cannot just electro shot anymore, but he probably doesn't need to, as he is already at +2. We do see that the Gholdengo goes for a protect. As the Raging Bolt burns a turn of sleep, it does outspeed now because of the electro web, but it might have also been going for a thunderclap. We see a spore go into the Raging Bolt just to try and cover for a switch and then attack into the Gholdengo. So Marco just wasted a turn of sleep that turn, which is really nice for him. But now that Marco's Gholdengo has Protect, it now has to go the offensive. Probably going to go for a Make It Rain that might be able to pick up the amoonguss from here and will do decent damage into the archaludon. He might also decide to go for a Shadow Ball to try and just get more damage into this archaludon. And if you're Giovanni, I think you're probably just going to go for the attack with your archaludon into the Gholdengo and get the KO, and then you might want to protect amoonguss or just pollen puff yourself. We do see the Make It Rain come out, doing about 45% to the archaludon and picking up the KO on amoonguss, which is a huge KO for Marco and really lets his urshifu in the back be able to finish this game most likely. And we do see that the Raging Bolt wakes up and goes for a Draco Meteor, picking up the KO, not even letting the archaludon go for an attack, which would have picked up the KO on the Gholdengo most likely. And now I really don't think Giovanni can win this with just the Kyogre, which I believe is at a very low HP. Marco has not only won this game, but probably doesn't have to reveal his last Pokemon, which is very good in playing a best of 3, because Giovanni doesn't fully understand what Marco's game plan was. However, maybe he can figure out that it is the urshifu in the back. But we do see a terrestrialization coming out from the Kyogre. I really think this is a good play, because if it does survive this turn, then he gets to see what's in the back. It will probably be able to take a Thunderclap because of this. It goes for the Orange Pulse. How much is this going to do? It picks up a KO on the Gholdengo. And Raging Bolt, is it going to be able to pick up a KO even at +2? Even at -2? It goes for the Volt Switch, not doing much. So Marco does have to reveal he has the Urshifu, but Sash Urshifu can definitely win this game. Just go for a Wicked Blow. Even if the Kyogre outspeeds, which it probably doesn't, it will live because of the Sash. So Marco can just go for the Wicked Blow, pick up the KO and win. We do see that his Dark Urshifu does outspeed the Kyogre, which is to be expected, but some timid Kyogres could outspeed an adamant Urshifu, for example. So now if you're both trainers, you've got to decide, are you going to try and adjust? I think if you're Marco, you have to really think if the Gholdengo was the right choice, because it did only live on 1 HP. If that is a roll and he doesn't get the roll in his second game, he could have easily lost because of that. So he's got to think, is the Gholdengo the right choice? Maybe he should be bringing the amoonguss instead. And then on Giovanni's side, because he lost, should he be changing what Pokemon to bring? Now I think that Giovanni brought the right Pokemon, but maybe he needs to switch the order that he'd bring them in. Unfortunately, he probably can't lead Archaludon without leading Kyogre, because otherwise it can't Thunderclap, but maybe he wants to go something like Amoonguss and Incineroar could be good. Because if Marco goes for the same lead again, then he could probably just fake out the Calyrex Ice and go for a Spore. But Marco has Gholdengo and amoonguss on his team, which are really good Spore switch-ins. So maybe that isn't how Giovanni should play it, because Marco can really punish that more defensive play. So if I'm Giovanni, I'm thinking that maybe you just lead the same again. I think he actually had the correct game plan, even though he lost. And I think he did actually lose off a roll. He did actually see that Marco didn't rely on Trick Room much. So maybe he could consider bringing the Tornadus, as the Electroweb Raging Bolt was really making sure that Marco was faster the entire time. And for the same reason, he could also bring the Flutter main to just be able to Icy Wind to counteract the Electroweb. It also has Thunder Wave, so maybe he could go for some Thunder Waves and hope for some paralyses. And Moonbass is going to be doing decent damage into most of Marco's team. It obviously won't do that much into the Gholdengo and the Amoonguss, but it does okay damage into everything else, but that Flutter main probably isn't going to be making very good damage trades. And we do see a switch up with the leads where Giovanni goes for Incineroar Archaludon, whereas Marco goes for Amoonguss and Raging Bolt. So Marco has changed what 4 Pokemon he's brought, because he has brought the Amoonguss this game, and I think this Amoonguss is in a fairly good position right now. It maybe wants to protect because of the Fake Out coming out, but it is probably going to be fairly safe to launch some Spores in a few turns. Giovanni can maybe go for a Fake Out and a Dragon Pulse into this Raging Bolt, as it can't protect, but then he's leaving himself open to Spores. And we do see a Draco Meteor coming out into the Raging Bolt. How much is it going to do? It lives on 29 HP, doing a lot of damage, but not enough to pick up the KO. Another Draco Meteor coming out onto the Incineroar, doing about 70%, which is pretty good. The Incineroar goes for the Self Will-O-Wisp on the Archaludon to be able to block a Spore, whereas Marco does not fall for that, goes for the Self Pollen Puff to be able to heal 50% of his Raging Bolt's HP, making that Archaludon's Draco Meteor basically useless. It's at -2 now. So now both of the dragons are at -2. You probably want to be switching them. Giovanni will have to straight switch it, or maybe he will switch in his Kyogre and then go for Electro shots, whereas Marco can just Volt Switch. We do see Giovanni switches out the Incineroar into the Amoonguss and goes for another Draco Meteor, leaving it on 50 HP. And then the Raging Bolt on the opposing side just goes for the Draco Meteor, doing about 35%, which is not that useful. And another Pollen Puff comes out, really just keeping this Raging Bolt healthy, whilst this Archaludon keeps weakening itself. So now both of the dragons are at -4. They almost definitely want to switch. Giovanni does have the Amoonguss in now, so he is fairly safe to just launch a Spore into that Raging Bolt if he doesn't expect Marco to have brought the Gholdengo this time. And we do see that Giovanni switches out the Archaludon into the Incineroar, getting rid of those drops, and Incineroar is just a fairly good switch in anyway. It would also cover a Spore if Marco wanted to decide he was going to switch into something else. The Calyrex Ice comes in for Marco instead of the Amoonguss, deciding the Amoonguss really isn't doing that much right now. And then the Raging Bolt goes for the Volt Switch, and I think this is going to be into the Amoonguss to be able to cover for the Spore. And if it is, that is such a good play. But he decides not to and goes into the Dark Urshifu. And now what's this Amoonguss going to do? It just goes for the Pollen Puff, heals the Incineroar, which is fairly good, but he could have got a Spore that turn, but I guess with the Volt Switch potential it wasn't safe. And now Giovanni has seen the rest of his team, and he knows that the only thing that can block Spore is Amoonguss. But now Giovanni has Fake Out this turn, so if you're Marco you probably want to be protecting, but Marco threatens so much damage here. He can Close Combat the Incineroar to pick up the KO, he can Glacial Lance the Amoonguss to pick up the KO, he could Terra Dark Wicked Blow the Amoonguss, which would probably pick up the KO. So he's in a really good offensive position. And we see Giovanni switch in the Kyogre instead of the Amoonguss, probably just expecting a Glacial Lance to go into that, and that's going to be able to take it really well. The Incineroar just goes for Fake Out on the Urshifu, stops it from attacking, but also breaks its Sash, which is quite good. And a Glacial Lance comes out, doing okay damage to both Pokemon, considering it's resisted, pretty good damage, but not doing too much. But now Marco's in a fairly good position where he could switch out his Calyrex into something that resists water and just close combat the Incineroar. He threatens for close combat and the Incineroar, so maybe the amoonguss switches in. So a really strong play would probably be Terra the Calyrex to be able to take a water move and then close combat and Glacial Lance, but he could also decide to Terra the urshifu, and by doing this, Kyogre might be in Wicked Blow range as it is Terra Dark, and we do see he is going for the Terra Dark play instead. He's decided that he thinks that this Kyogre is in Wicked Blow range, and we'll have to see if it is. This turn, is there any other Terras? There isn't. He goes for the Wicked Blow into the Kyogre. Is it going to be enough to pick up the KO? And it is, getting the KO, which is huge for Marco. That might be game winning, getting rid of Giovanni's restricted before it could do anything. And now the Incineroar goes for the knockoff. We do see it outspeeds without the Electro Web, knocking off the Clear Amulet, which could have been useful, but it is knocked out now. Now, but knocking off the Clear Amulet could have been good if it survived, because then you can Parting Shot and then Intimidate it again. But as it died, that's obviously not useful. Maybe Giovanni there should have gone for the Will-O-Wisp, but he also needs the damage on the Calyrex at this point, so I think the knockoff was probably quite a good play. Now, Giovanni does still have his Terra left, however, he's Terra Ghost Archaludon and Terra Dark Amoonguss, so we can maybe force some mind games with his Terra against this urshifu. But we just see the urshifu switching out. I think Marco deciding he thinks that's the way he's going to win this game, but he doesn't want to play any mind games with Terras, and he wants to keep it more safe. We do see a Protect as well. Marco just playing really safe this turn. The Archaludon just goes for Flash Cannon into the Calyrex Ice, which would have picked up a knockout, and then a Spore into the switching in Amoonguss. Really good play from Marco. He could probably now just go for a Glacial Lance and Rage Powder, and I think that's a fairly safe play. And I don't think there's any better plays. He can't Spore the Archaludon because obviously it's burnt. We see a Protect coming out from Giovanni's Amoonguss, probably expecting the Glacial Lance, and then we see the Rage Powder coming out from Marco's Amoonguss. An Electro Shot from the Archaludon, which will put it at +1 special attack and also do okay damage. But is probably not going to be enough to get rid of this Amoonguss. Yes, it's nowhere near, and the Glacial Lance is going to come out. It's going to do okay damage and boost the defense of Archaludon by 1. But I think at this point Marco can just... It actually does so much damage! It does like 65%. I was not expecting it to do that much. Is it in burn range? And the burn picks up the KO. So Giovanni technically KOing his own Pokemon with the Incineroar Self-Wisp. It's Amoonguss against the world, and I really don't think it can do it. But let's see. Amoonguss is Terra Dark, so it maybe can take a Glacial Lance, but then it has to not be immune to Rage Powder, and we do see the forfeit. Marco wins in such a dominating fashion. That was such an impressive game by Marco.
We are here with none other than Marco. And Marco, it's a pleasure every single time we see you join us on this couch area. Huge congrats on that great win versus Giovanni. It seemed like it was tough, and it could have gone initially either way, but it seems like you just trained your Pokemon very well. So how are you feeling after that?
Yeah, I'm feeling really, really good because that matchup was really, really tough. Like Archaludon, Kyogre, there's a lot of things you have to be aware of. And yeah, game 1 was extremely close. I feel like in game 2, I kind of understood like the type of play he was going for.
Yep.
And it's kind of like overall game plan. And I was kind of able to read like most of the turns, and that definitely put me in a great spot.
Yeah, I mean, that gholdengo really paying dividends to how well it was able to survive. I think it was 1 hit point, if I'm not mistaken, so it's like an invisible focus sash. And at that point, I feel like it was quite integral to have it because you had the nasty plot set up in order to get rid of a Amoonguss. So was that your key strategy that you identified by bringing the gholdengo?
So yeah, like I know that usually in the matchup they always bring Kyogre and Archaludon. Also Amoonguss is really, really important. So I'm aware of the fact that usually when they have like Will-O-Wisp Incineroar, they tend to like lead it against Calyrex, of course, because it's one of the best, the best Pokemon against that. So yeah, my overall plan was like I was exactly expecting him to go Kyogre and Incin. I was like I can probably like chip it down, and then Gholdengo's kind of like pretty good into like Archaludon and Amoonguss. So yeah, like overall that was kind of a plan. Honestly, I didn't really expect like Electroshock to do that much.
Right.
Yeah, like I was like I'm probably like leaving on like 10%, but it did like 99.9. So
crazy. I didn't actually expect that. And then obviously it's able to try to get that snowball effect of trying to like stack up the special attack boost in order to deal even more damage. But then we saw your switch up a bit in game 2. you did identify, obviously, that archaludon seemed to be like the main sort of threat, and you focused into it straight off the bat. I think it was a Draco Meteor, and then you were able to try to whittle it down a bit more slowly. But Calyrex did drop in game 1. We saw it was able to pull through for game 2. So what were your thoughts going into that?
So in game 2, I kind of thought about like the fact that, yeah, like I knew that was going for Incineroar Kyogre, but probably going for like Raging Bolt Amoonguss would have given me like a better advantage.
Yeah.
Especially because his Archaludon was in Terra Grass. So I was kind of able to like, yeah, put pressure with Spore. And also, yeah, like since I have Volt, which is a really, really good tech that a friend of mine suggested me, like I'm able to go for Draco Meteor and then also Volt, which I was a little bit scared of the fact that, yeah, since I don't have like Spore immunity other than Amoonguss,
yep,
it might be able to like overwhelm me. But at the same time, since I have Volt Switch, I'm able, for example, to go for plays like switch out of Amoonguss, Volt Switch out, and then I get in with Amoonguss on that slot, and they're supposed to score there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, for example, there was a specific turn in which he could have done that, but yeah, I was expecting him to go for Pollen Puff because he's switching like the Incineroar.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can probably position myself better, but just put in Urshifu. Even if he goes to Spore, it's not the end of the world because he doesn't really have enough like offensive pressure on the field, so I'm able to making ways like some slip turns on the Urshifu.
You can compensate and stall him out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, he went for Pollen Puff, so then I was in the exact spot that I wanted.
Yeah, and then like obviously as the consecutive like Draco Meteors, which further degrade its special output offensively for the Archaludon, right? Because you're at that point, -2 special attack, it's not going to be able to pick up the KO it needs to on the Raging Bolt, and you were able to identify that and play around it, which was very cool to see. I just guess, generally speaking, with your team, I mean, Calyrex Ice Rider, we were just talking about it. It's a really busted Pokemon. It just feels like it's so strong, and you can have the duality of having the Trick Room set up, or let's say even if you don't want Trick Room set up, you just go for the attacks. Clear Amulet, #1 item, no doubt about it. So what generally were your thoughts after watching Indianapolis Regional Championships in terms of the meta, and what led you to bringing this Pokemon?
So I mainly have been testing this team for like since they really started the format. I wanted to build on Calyrex, and I figured out that like with gholdengo is extremely good because everybody was like trying to use Amoonguss, of course, to stop like Calyrex from doing everything in Trick Room.
Yeah.
And so I mainly built on this core. I didn't really like I watched, of course, Indianapolis. I figured out, of course, like the plans against the most common teams, but I didn't really like think that was going to affect too much the meta game here. So like I just stick with the same team. I figured out more, like I work more on my plays instead of like the meta, and I just stick with this team for like the last month, basically.
Nice. Is that a suggestion you would give to anyone as well at home, generally speaking, or sort of it just maybe feels a bit more tailored to how you strategize on team?
So I feel like in this format, it's really hard to like basically cover for everything. So if you have a team that you're able to play really well, like the best thing to do is to just like grind the matchup as much as you can. Of course, like if the most common team is like Aurolos, of course, like you kind of have to change things up. But in this case, I felt like everything was kind of fine. Some matchups were good, some were bad, and like almost all of them were like even. So I was like, yeah, I can just play better and use my team basically.
Just win, just play better, just play good. I guess how so far has the rest of your day been going? We mentioned you're at 6-0 right now, which is fabulous. You've just got one more round until you can lock in that day 2, of course. But are there any other like weird matchups that you had to run into today so far?
So for now, I haven't really played like. The stuff that I played, I was kind of like prepared for. I really hope they're not going to be playing like News because it's a Regidrago with Terra Dragon.
Yeah.
It kills my whole team basically. So yeah.
It's very tricky, right? Because you got the different like the Trick Room and the Tailwind, and you know like those sweepers being the Terrapagos and the Regidrago that you need to deal with. Although you do have a Calyrex Ice Rider. Maybe it allows you a bit more room, right?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that I don't have like, I dropped the Terra Fairy on Raging Ball, I dropped the Terra Fairy on Gholdengo.
Yeah.
So you can basically just spam like Dragon Attack. So yeah, I just hope I'm not going to be playing, but I mean, if he keeps winning, of course, and I keep winning, I'm going to be playing.
You're going to have to meet. Yeah. No, but that's great to hear. I guess generally speaking, have you been able to, did you travel here on your own or with a couple of friends?
Yeah, I'm here with my little brother. He also, of course, competes in the tournament. He got 5th in the senior division.
Did it? Of course. Your brother's really good as well. But that's really wholesome to hear that you guys have been like working together so far. Did you give him any tips as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, he didn't use my team because I mean he has like his own playstyle. He used like other friends of mine. He used Joe's team, which is also really good. It's pretty much like has even matched me to most of the stuff. And yeah, I'm glad that he did like okay with the team because it's also pretty hard to play since it's a balanced team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what restricted is your brother actually?
It's Kalido.
It's Oh, okay. So, Calyrex Shadow Rider. Is there a reason that you thought maybe you might be able to use that in the current meta for yourself? Because we know it is very powerful. It does have as one as well, but a different variety. It's got the Grimnay, and it's just very fast and very strong. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I tried it. Actually, like my main plan was to like master that one because before the meta was dropping, I was like, this one like the best one is fast. Like you're able to like stack up boosts really easily.
Yep.
But then like, yeah, since it's only like, you only get to play one Uber, it's really hard to get rid of the stuff that basically annoys Calyrex. Just in Cineral plus another Pokemon, there may be like a Phrygia, a Porygon 2, like a Terabagos or something. Like, yeah, they're really hard to like break with the Calyrex. So yeah, I figured out that, I mean, Calyrex was probably slightly better, at least at the moment.
It definitely feels like it, right? Just because you don't need to risk the Terra straight away, even though you did use Terra Water, but that was in order to compensate for that Kyogre Water Spout, which we know if you allow it to get that move off, in the rain with Splash play as well, it can wreak havoc. So do you feel like there's any place so far? I mean, so far Giovanni's been proving there's a bit of place with Kyogre. We saw a lot of Assault Vest sets being run in Indianapolis. So what are your general thoughts around Kyogre?
So I feel like it was like a pretty good call. Like on the in-game ladder, it was really doing good. Like the team with the AV Kyogre and like Jugglis. But I feel like now, of course, since Miraidon is basically the most common team, I don't know like how strong that is. I didn't really consider it because, as I said, I stick with this team for like since the meta drop. But
yeah, 100%.
But yeah, like I feel like there's definitely room. I really feel like Koraidon can really be like a good meta call, especially. I feel like, for example, like Pelipper Calyrex, that type of team will probably like drop like in usage a little bit, and when that will happen, probably like Koraidon will be pretty good again.
That makes sense because you're sort of forced to bring that as the meta adapts towards it, right? So let's just talk a bit about yourself as well. So far, you've got 1,262 CP. You got the equivalent of 3 invites. Please, can you give one to me? I just, obviously you're in the race for the top 16 in EU region. So far, travel award towards Worlds. Is that still your goal? Are you even thinking about going to NAIC?
Oh yeah, I will attend NAIC. I think I'm pretty much locked for the top 16 in Europe. But yeah, my goal, of course, is to get like the first place. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
That's it. That's the plan. You were here last season. You got second place in Sweden. It was Malmo Regional then. It is Stockholm now. So I definitely see you want to go ahead and get that one in your belt and trophy case. So what I'd ask right now, though, before then, do you have any shout-outs or anything, or any sort of call-outs you'd like to give to anyone at home or even in the venue?
Oh yeah, I want to shout out my friends that have been helping me out with the matchups and also with getting like the in-game Pokemon, because of course like I needed like a Calyrex for like the last week, and I wasn't able to like play the whole game again.
It's quite a big ask.
yeah, exactly. Like same for me and like my brother. So I needed to, and yeah, like my friend helped me out with that. So really grateful for them, of course.
Shout outs to you. But of course, that has been Marco and myself.